I grew up in a very Chinese household where you only talk about, do you have money? How are you doing physically? Are you sick? Are you well? How's school?
There was a lot of not fitting in, bullying. They used to call me the Incredible Hulk because I was, you know, muscular and bigger. I wasn't this little petite thing. And
I knew I was different. I didn't really think about being gay, but I knew that I was different. I just didn't have a vocabulary for it at the time.
I basically went through the motions of dating women and doing all that type of thing just to basically hide myself.
I was like, why? I don't understand. Oh, all you want to talk about is boys, and I just couldn't care less. Okay.
People who were my friends completely would ignore me if I walked up to them. I would walk up to groups of kids that, you know, the month before we were best friends in drama class, and a whole table full of people would just completely pretend as if I wasn't there.
Working with youth as part of my job, I see the kind of trauma and the fear and that sense of not being able to come out and be who you are. That's huge. It's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, he would always come up to me and scare me every morning, push me into a locker, slam me up against a locker. That was sort of the morning routine. I spent a lot of time with my face up against a locker.
I had a really hard time identifying myself as queer. I resisted it a lot. I bullied, actually, gay kids myself, and would just had this different idea of what gay people meant, that homosexuals were a type of person and I wasn't it.
I grew up in northern Alberta. My dad was an RCMP officer. Both my parents were white, and we lived in Valley View and High Level and really glamorous populations. And I knew at a really young age that I was different from everybody else, and I was different for two reasons: being black, and then came to realize that I knew I was gay.
I grew up in Cornwall, Ontario, and I was born in 1955. So this is a city that has a pulp and paper and nylon factory, Courtaulds. So extremely working class, and also a very hockey playing city. So I guess it would be considered a kind of a macho town.
The thought of coming out was fully charged with anxiety for me. I think it was, I grew up in a homophobic sort of small town for all intents and purposes. High school, you know, my family was homophobic because, you know, aside from the outward sort of jokes that my father would do at the dinner table about gay men and that kind of stuff, there was also no talking about sexuality. There was no talking about gender stuff. Like there was nothing like that. There was, you know, there was just no discussion about it. So there was this sort of like silence, but this invisibility about it all. And so I didn't have a sense of, you know, I didn't really have a sense of myself as a lesbian until I created it, like, and I found a community, because I didn't even know what a lesbian was until I went to university, really. I mean, I sort of got it, but I didn't really get it.
So I grew up in rural South Surrey, in farming country, really, and lived in a big family. There were 5 kids. I had a happy, really happy family household, lots of love in the family, and we had a lot of fun. We were poor, but we had a lot of fun.
Well, I grew up in Indiana, which is in the Midwest of the US, of course, and my family was typical in certain ways, in that I grew up with a mom and a dad and 3 kids, not 2.5. I am the oldest of 3.
I grew up in Vancouver, and in various different neighborhoods, but mostly in Vancouver, and there wasn't too many people of color. I mean, there was a strong Asian population, but there wasn't any black people. And so my family, in a sense, was the black community.
I knew every safe route how to get home from school without getting beat up. I'd leave right at right as soon as the bell. I could slip out. I learned how to disappear. It was a really interesting thing. You learn how to disappear into the background so you don't attract attention, which is deeply ironic now, considering what I do. But you learn how to not attract attention, and you learn how to survive. You learn how to read people very quickly. It's amazing. As a young gay kid, you know, to develop your spidey sense, your spidey gay sense, you know, or your sixth sense of just like, this person is a threat to me. I know they're a threat to me, so I'm going to avoid them at all cost. And this is a safe person. This is a safe place. They're accepting. They're open. And that's when I knew I'd be okay.
When I was in school and I realized I was different, and I realized that I like men, and I was always looking for images and stuff like that. There was a magazine called After Dark, and there were pictures of naked guys and bums and stuff. I was very frightened, because at that time, 1982-83, there was no images on TV. There were no gay characters. Culture Club Boy George was a singer, but wasn't very out about being gay. Sometimes rock stars talked about being bisexual. So I was pretty petrified. And the other big thing was that's when AIDS hit. So here I was, this young guy in high school, thinking, oh my God, I might be gay. I might be that thing called gay, and I'm going to get AIDS immediately and die. So it was not a good time to be coming out at all. We used to get bullied and teased a lot in high school, to the point where I actually got physically assaulted when I was at my own home by some of the school kids, which eventually caused me to drop out of school. I dropped out of high school because I just found it too distressing to be there. It was not a good time. I felt very alone, very secretive. I actually remember now, I just remember I had, speaking of After Dark magazine, I had a couple of them hidden under my bed, and my mom found them. And my stepfather just screaming at me, don't you want to be normal? What the hell's wrong with you? Right? So it was just incredibly not a fun time in high school.
I don't think that people in my small town in Sault Ste. Marie knew what butch, lesbian, dyke. I don't think anybody knew what that was at that point. I didn't even know until I was 16. You know, I think that at that point it was just, you were different. You know, I didn't feel like I fit in. They didn't feel like I fit in. You know, I was great with the guys, and I got to hang out with the guys, but even that at some point didn't work, because the guys, once they started to have that sexual awareness, realized it wasn't okay for me to be kind of playing sports with them anymore, and you know, they didn't want me around anymore. So what started off as not fitting in with the girls eventually turned into not fitting in with the guys either. You know, and even if they didn't know what the words were, even if I didn't know what the words were, I knew I didn't fit in. I wasn't one of them. And there was no one that I knew who was like me. There was no one kind of in my immediate surroundings. Until I got to high school, certainly, then you could kind of start to figure it out. But even then, I didn't know what the words were. You know, I knew I was in love with my best friend, but she didn't know what the words were, and I didn't know what the words were. It was just, we hung out together, and we might as well have been in a relationship, even though it wasn't sexual, but we knew that something was going on. But we didn't know. I mean, we had our own homophobia built in because we didn't know what it was. You know, when I eventually tried to figure out what it was, there was my own embarrassment about it, because I didn't want to be one of those people. You know, and certainly in a small town, those people were the ones who, you know, were hidden off to the side. And certainly when I came out, they were still, you know, butch meant you dressed like a guy, and you wore a guy's suit, and you slicked your hair back, and, you know, like, if you were going to be butch, that's what it looked like. And I wasn't that. I was a jock. You know, I was somebody who was coming out and just wanted to figure out what was happening, where my feelings were, and why was I in love with my gym teacher and my best friend, and, you know, why didn't I fit in with the girls or the boys, for that matter.
I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, so from the get-go it was a very conservative environment that I grew up in. I had a very open family, but I do remember being young, and for example, my mom would tell me to go get ready because company was coming over, and Peter, go upstairs, get ready, we're having people over. And I would put on like a very long men's t-shirt and a belt, and that's it, like a little dress. And I remember my mom looking at me and sort of like saying, you know, Peter, you're gonna have to put something else on, and I didn't understand why. And I kept finding myself in situations where I was doing things that made me happy, like playing with Barbies or practicing Spice Girls songs or learning Britney Spears dances. And it wasn't until I was put with other kids or other people were in a position to look at me and judge me that I realized, oh, this isn't normal.
I grew up in a small town in the prairies in Saskatchewan, farming community, very small. So coming out for me at that particular time was not an option. I did not want to put myself in that position of being ridiculed and basically run out of town, or so I felt at that particular time. I saw it happen to someone else, and I decided that I needed to protect myself and stay closeted at that particular time, which I wouldn't want to wish on anyone.
The whole experience growing up as a young gay kid was traumatic, and I think it was my whole agenda at that time was surviving, learning how I could survive without being teased. But it just like every name, femme, faggot, sissy, you know, any name they could think of, you know, we've heard them all. But at the time, I didn't know I didn't understand it. I didn't know how to deal with it and process it. All I knew was like, why? Why do these people want to beat me up? Why do they want to make fun of me? And on top of that, you know, I clearly had a problem with my weight too. So it was, hey, fat faggot, hey, you little femme, you know, and they do all kinds of horrible things to you. So rather than just being a regular kid and sort of perhaps enjoying my childhood or my adolescence, if you will, you know, I was obsessing about ways that I could get out of school, that I could not go to school where I would be teased and bullied. And bullied to the point where, you know, you'd have to get your parents to pick you up and everything. And it was always an issue.
Summertime, and we got together as the fall was dying down. We melted into one another.